Hello, my name's Mary Susie from Bead Me a Story, and I want to show you today how to work with Rhinestone Montee beads and work that into chainmail. So Rhinestone Montee beads work really well if you use the right sizes and if you use the right size jump rings. This does require fairly good eyesight to do, so just keep that in mind. Nearsighted people do a little bit better. We're basically working with shiny on shiny materials. So these are small, they can be very hard to see, but you can see that you can make absolutely gorgeous results with this. So this is one of my larger cuff bracelets. Later on, we can start working with rhinestone rivolees, pointed back rhinestones, and integrating those with the Rhinestone Montees. And this is one of my simpler bracelets that you'll be able to do fairly quickly after learning how to mount your jump rings onto the Rhinestone Montees. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is talk about the different types of Montees. This is a glass 4mm Monte. The benefit of using glass Montees is that they come in a wide variety of colors. So I carry these in over 20 colors. This is the 4mm size. It is small, it can be challenging to work with, but it really fits well. That fancy golden crystal cuff bracelet I just showed you was made using this size of Montees, and it works for a lot of things just because the size is perfect for a 20 gauge 1/8 inch jump ring, and you can really fill the form well, and the sizing is great. This is a 5mm Monte. You can see it's quite a bit larger and chunkier than the 4mm Monte. These are great to use sparingly, but when you use all these side by side, it can tend to be a little bit chunky. Great for somebody who loves like a lot of bling and a lot of color, but perhaps not for everybody who wants a dainty looking tennis bracelet or something like that. The next type of Monte I want to show you, and I want to explain the difference between the kinds of Montees. These are Chainmaille Montees, and this one I'm placing over here is a Preciosa Rose Monte. So Swarovski and Preciosa carry these Rose Montees, and I'll just point out right here, you can see the difference between the two. The Rose Monte has a channel in the back. Certain sizes will still work with the chainmail. We can still use it. It just has different behaviors. And the Chainmaille Monte, I just want to show you that it's quite a bit deeper. And that's because this is made from a pointed back rhinestone in there. So the setting is much deeper, and it's going to sit up a little bit. Okay. Also, the Chainmaille Montees also come in Swarovski and in Preciosa, but it's very hard to get the colors that you need, particularly if you want to do birthstones for people and things like that. It can be very challenging to get colors. Also, I do a whole series of 3D charms with the rhinestones, and it's very difficult to find any kind of real colorful stones in the Swarovski and the Preciosa. There's just one more that I want to have make an entrance here, and this is referred to as a navette. The navette is also referred to sometimes as a horse eye shape, and that shape is also a chaton. It's a pointed back, so it's in a little bit deeper setting. These are absolutely stunning. The cut's beautiful. These are glass that you're seeing, and glass come in a very reasonable price. Whereas if you were to try and get these in Swarovskis, they are probably well over $1 a piece. And in Preciosa, they're probably a little bit less than that, but they still cost a pretty penny. So if you're doing a larger piece, that gets real expensive. So the glass is great because it gives us an opportunity to start working with these things without all the cost. So I am going to stop and clear away some things, and we'll get started. Okay, So basically I just left some of the 4mm Rhinestone Montees on here. These are aquamarine color. And the reason you see I've pre-opened my jump rings, the reason that I have two different colors of jump rings here is because the silver, these are non-tarnishing anodized aluminum jump rings. The silver started running extra thick this past year, and I couldn't get him through the hole of the rhinestone. So occasionally, due to the anodizing process, you can get a batch of jump rings that run too thick to fit through your Monte beads, and in that case you're gonna have to find a workaround. So I've found a really great workaround that pretty much always works with silver, and that's to use the silver frost anytime I'm going through a Monte bead. So the silver frost tends to always run skinnier, pretty much in every size. It always runs a little bit smaller than all the rest of them. Now, if we're looking at gunmetal versus the matte titanium gray, I can't promise you that the matte titanium gray is going to run skinnier than the gunmetal, and the same thing with the gold. I can't make that promise, but with silver frost, it pretty much always runs a little bit skinnier than the rest of the jump rings. So this is the color that I would opt to use anytime you're using silver to get through your Monte beads, unless you enjoy being tortured. Okay, so I'm going to pick up my Monte bead, and you can see I've picked it up here on the side. I picked up my jump ring. You can see that my pliers are running parallel to the jump ring, and I'm holding this Monte bead on its side, and basically, because the jump ring's a circle, you're going to be tempted to try and get into the hole of the Monte, which is right here, coming in like from the side, and just remember that that's a curve. So you almost need to come in from the bottom of the Monte, okay, and make sure that it's perpendicular to the bead. Okay, now once you get it into the one hole, I'm not forcing this, I'm just going to gently tilt the Monte upward, and you can see it just automatically found its way across the corner to that next hole. And I'm going to turn this to the back side so that you can see that that's going across the corner. We're not going straight across. Okay? So in many of our projects, I'm going to show you the hardest configuration of these first. So I have picked up one. I'm going to pick up another Monte. You can see I'm holding it on its side, and I want to come in through the bottom. Let this tilt upwards, okay? And it found its way to the second hole. I probably should have mentioned this before, but I want to point out that I'm using a chisel nose plier from Xuron, and I really like to use the chisel nose when I'm doing any kind of rhinestones because it comes to a chiseled point, okay? So it gives me a really tiny little tip since I'm working with really small materials, and I believe these were actually made to face in the other direction, to face down like this so you could grab more of your jump ring. But I work with a lot of really small materials, and having that little pointy tip to grab onto things is absolutely priceless. So I'm going to recommend that when you're doing this type of work that you have the point down and that you use a chisel nose Xuron plier because they're absolutely fantastic. Okay, I'm going to pick up another jump ring. So now that I've got two Montees on here, you can see I put two Montees onto that same jump ring. I'm starting to build a row of rhinestones here. I've kind of got a handle on it. I've got a little bit more to grasp onto, so it's a little bit easier. I'm going to come in from the bottom. I was perpendicular, let it turn up, okay? And I'm going to kind of choke up, grab this a little bit higher on here so I've got more room. Pick up another rhinestone and tilt that up, okay? So that's 3 rhinestones in a row. Okay, and if I wanted to, this is challenging, but if I wanted to, I could close this up. I could add another jump ring and turn this into a triangle. I use that when I'm working with a weave called the inverted round, which is a 3-sided chainmail weave. That's the only time I've ever had occasion to make triangles in this. They're very difficult to do because it's a little bit tight, and like I keep saying, this is very teeny tiny work. Okay, so I'm going to put my jump ring through this next one. Okay, and I'm going to pick up one more rhinestone. Okay, now if you can't get right into the hole, there's a couple things that you can do. This, actually, it just went in, but if I could not get into that hole, it's always worth trying to turn this a quarter turn and go in through the next 2 holes. A lot of times with the glass, they are slightly imperfect, so the holes might just line up better. If you're using Swarovski Montees, the holes probably line up absolutely perfectly and you won't have that problem. But not every single Monte that you get is going to be absolutely perfect. The settings in the bottom can sometimes be just a little bit uneven. So it's good to practice and learn on the glass because it's actually harder. And then when you spend the money for the more expensive materials, you're very well practiced, you know what you're doing, and it's actually a little bit easier to do. Okay, so you can see I have a little strip of 4 rhinestones. Okay, so this is, we can make a rhinestone where we put a jump ring on either side of it. We can make a strip of rhinestones, so we could have had 2 rhinestones, 3 rhinestones, 4 rhinestones. We keep going with the strip for a long time. And then the other configuration that I'm about to show you is I am going to put a jump ring through the last rhinestone in the row, and then I'm gonna see how I'm cupping my hand underneath this to lift it up and let it come up and around in a circle. And I'm gonna go into the hole of the first one, and you can see that's gonna turn this into a square. Okay, so this square configuration is probably the most complex configuration that you can make. This stuff doesn't get really complicated. This part is just about mounting the Montees onto jump rings, and that's it. So you can either do singles, you can do a run of them, or you can do a square. And the thing I want to show you about the square is I do some tubular work with the rhinestones. And in order to make a tube, a lot of times all we're doing is just taking that square, and see how I've let the rhinestones all point to the outside. So now I could add another row above it, and I could start linking that row to this row. So this makes the rhinestones face to the outside as opposed to all facing in one direction. That's another thing I'll mention to you, probably on the first 1 or 2 of these pieces that you do. It is very likely that you will suddenly put on a second rhinestone and accidentally have it turning the wrong way because you're struggling with the size and getting the jump ring into the hole, and somehow you accidentally manage to put the second rhinestone on in the wrong direction. And I will show you what that would look like, just so you could be aware of it. Okay, so you can see before I even close this, that this is a back side and this is a front side. So if I go ahead and close this now, the second one's going to be facing the wrong direction, and we don't want to do that. Okay, so I just want to show you too what a single one is going to look like. So that you can see how we just make little, you know, You can make a little single. We can have strips. We can have squares. And basically, once you learn to do these couple of things, that's all there is to learn as far as mounting the Monte beads onto a jump ring. Okay, so now to show you what one of these rose Montees is going to look like if we try and mount that. So this particular one is a 20 SS size, and I actually moved to a larger size jump ring. This is larger than the Silver Frost ones that we had been using. You can see it right here, that's a little bit larger. This is a 20 gauge 5/32 size. And when I say 20 gauge, that means it's 0.8 millimeters thick. So that's the maximum. Most of the holes in beads and Montees and things like that are about 1 millimeter. So you don't have a lot of wiggle room with that. So you can see we have a little channel in the back here. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to go into a hole and we're going to let it come around the corner and out the other hole. And it just all looks a whole lot different. But you're going to do the same thing. See how I'm trying to come in from the bottom and make sure I'm perpendicular to this hole before I try and enter it. Now with this one, what I like to do, because you do have to force it a little bit, it just doesn't wiggle on all the time with the Rose Monte, is I grab my jump ring down low to get some force behind it and push that through the hole. Okay, and that's pretty tight on there. So when you can make a square out of this size of Preciosa Rose Montees, just like you made a square here. You do it exactly the same way, but what I will tell you is you can already see that this is going to be flatter, that this is sitting down lower than these are standing up, okay? So it makes it very tight and very flat. So it's going to have a different behavior. You're going to want to use that in different types of jewelry than you use this one. And I just want to show you one more thing. Again, I'm going to use the 20 gauge 5/32 jump ring, the jump ring that's just a little bit bigger. And I just want to briefly show you the navette and how the navette is going to work. So the navette has a hole here, 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 and here. 4 holes in the back. But really the only way to do this is to go straight across. Okay, so you can put a jump ring on one end, and then you can put a jump ring on the other end. And then once we do this, you can work these into all sorts of different configurations. So at the beginning, I showed you a few ways of using them, and I do have kits and tutorials to show you how. But I would strongly advise that if you've never done this before, you start with one of my beginner earring sets, which is just basically teaching you to do the little square, and then we do a little single piece, and we hang a little dangle on your earring, and there's not too much to it, but I cannot caution you enough that this is very tiny. These are shiny materials next to more shiny materials. Not everybody has the eyes to do it. There are some great magnifiers out there and some better lighting that you can use, but ultimately, if you're unable to see small things, this is just not a project for you. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you give some of these projects a try. Thanks so much.